Please stop. Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Yeah, no, racism didn't just happen long ago. It's still happening now.
Well, the first time I had a personal experience with racism, I mean, growing up in Atlantic Beach, because it's nestled between Myrtle Beach and North Myrtle Beach, we were aware of our blackness at a very early age. Once we would venture outside of our neighborhoods, we would get harassed by the police officers.
Systematic racism and oppression of specifically black people is live and well. My mother was born in 1965. That's my mother, not my grandmother, my mother. That means that my mother is the first woman in my family, my immediate family, to be born a free woman with all of her full rights. I'm not talking about being free from slavery, but being born in America with her full rights as an American citizen. That is my mom, not my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. That's my mom. And so to say, oh, that happened so long ago, no. Historically, where we are in the timeline of the 400 years that we've been in this nation, since 1619, when the first African people came to the shores of America enslaved, up until now, we are still in an intense timeline where we see racism and systems of oppression still affecting us.
2020 or 1920. In the future, will people know the difference?
And CNN can now project that Barack Obama, 47 years old, will become the president-elect of the United States.
In 2008, the U.S. and the world saw change and hope renewed. By 2016, the white lash began.
And he's walking out like big high fives, smiling, laughing, like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
To understand how we got here, we must first understand where we began.
Your name is Toby.
Here. People stolen from a continent and forced under the rule of white supremacy. Dred Scott dared to sue for the freedom of himself and his family after the slave masters moved to a free state. He lost. The decision was the final spark to start a civil war. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves, but not without resistance and taking years for the word of mouth to travel. Many slaves were forced to stay on or sharecrop.
I don't think that America ever has been great for my people. And that is why we always get the questions of why are you so angry? Why do you think we're angry?
During Reconstruction, 265 black delegates elected 100 previously enslaved men, 16 of them served in Congress roughly between the time frame of 1865 to 1877. The South saw Reconstruction as humiliating and did not welcome it. Slave owners received reparations, and former slaves received a new life under the Jim Crow laws.
We can't adequately assess the institutional racism in America without looking at the history of America. So for black people, we were brought here to be the burden bearers of the country. We weren't brought to be citizens.
It's a code word for make America white again. Make it like it was when we were in charge. Make it like it was before black folks started valuing themselves. Make it like it was before we had a black president.
After the Civil War and protection of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, along with the original Civil Rights Act of 1866, Black Americans enjoyed a period when they were allowed to vote, participate in the political process, acquire lands, employment, and use public accommodations. President Grant was elected largely in part to 500,000 new black male voters in the South. Reconstruction had its shortcomings. Women still couldn't vote, and Native Americans were stripped of their land and forced to reservations or massacred, while Black Americans faced mob violence and murder, rendering the 15th Amendment, which was designed to enhance, protect, and guarantee black male voting nationwide, a dead letter.
No, America has not improved. America is only doing what it is forced to do. Frederick Douglass said back in the day that power does not concede power without a struggle. And he said it over 100 years ago, and that remains true to this day.
Opposition quickly arose and found means to reverse the gains. July 30th, 1866, former Confederates attacked a constitutional convention in the city of New Orleans. By the time President Grant died in 1885, Jim Crow had replaced Reconstruction, and the little rights gained were stripped away. The root began as black codes in 1865 following the ratification of the 13th Amendment,
and appeared in the South to push black people to indentured servitude, remove voting rights, control housing, and how they traveled. Former Confederate soldiers worked as the police and the judges.
Growing up in Mississippi was a tough era because I grew up in the time when we had nothing but racism. We wasn't allowed into the courthouse square, and we had to walk around the courthouse yard. And we saw other race coming. We had to step off into the mud and let them walk on the sidewalk. We weren't allowed to walk on the sidewalk.
How can you get over something like that? The way your parents was treated and their grandparents was treated, and you gonna get over it? And people being killed daily?
During this same period, the Klan was born in Pulaski, Tennessee, as a private club for Confederate veterans. By the 1920s, motion pictures arrived and sold it a new way to advertise. America was bombarded with racist images in film and the ads they showed.
Oh my gosh, look at how she's acting this morning. Look at how she's
There
acting.
has been no police that called me back, and now they're shoving me. And
they're shoving me. Look.
And actually, during Jim Crow, Atlantic Beach was the only beach that black people could come to in Myrtle Beach.
The laws flourished, banning black Americans from living in white neighborhoods.
Your home will go down in value and crime rates will rapidly rise.
If you went to the southern part of Indiana, I'm probably running the same thing, because Indianapolis, about the same thing, going towards, places down south, because they hung people in the southern part of Indiana. They killed a lady selling encyclopedias in the southern part of Indiana before, because she was after Dust Dog. Couldn't let Dust Dog kill sundown town.
Because it was up north, I was shocked that it was as segregated as it was, that the black people lived in their little areas and couldn't live anywhere else because they could not buy a house anywhere else. And the white lived all over. I was really surprised.
Black towns began to rise and flourish. Jealousy set in, and those towns soon were turned to ash. Former Confederate soldiers began promoting the Civil War as a just war and Reconstruction as a lost cause. Picture films helped promote the propaganda to the masses. Post-World War I, white Americans were scared that the black Americans would have renewed hopes of being equals. Lynchings became prevalent. As lynchings increased, so did the race riots, although vastly one-sided. By the 1920s, motion pictures arrived and sold it a new way to advertise. America was bombarded with racist images in film and the ads they showed. World War II legal covenants made it difficult or impossible to buy homes due to redlining.
See, the Holocaust didn't happen in this country, so when the Jews mention it, they're talking about a different group of people, Germany. So it's not a reflection on America per se.
Black Americans had grown weary and fought against the constant oppression, but made little headway.
Oh no, there's still slavery. It's just a different form. You know, it's like a liar. Sometimes when you catch a liar in a lie, they find another way to lie.
Well, it's just the way the social contract was written up. See, the way racism was created was to keep kind of poor white people believing that they were in the same position as rich white people. And they made black people the designated poor.
In 1955, Emmett Till, a 14-year-old black American, was murdered in a racist attack that shocked the nation and became a catalyst for the civil rights movement. J.W. Milan and Roy Bryant weighted him down and tossed him in the river. In 2017, Carolyn Bryant admitted it was a lie that got Emmett Till killed.
Watching that picture of Emmett Till, Emmett Till way before, years when 55 when he got killed. But the teachers made in grade school when we kind of got older, made sure we knew about that. And seeing a picture, had the Jet magazine, saw that picture like that. Oh yeah, going down south, you didn't want to get like that, say the wrong thing. You always, say yes sir, no sir, you know what to say. If you got, said the wrong thing, you end up like Emmett Till.
To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
The promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
I grew up in a time where I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. Matter of fact, we was marching to pull the tent, as we call it, on Orange Street. I was in the middle. Jesse Jackson was on my right, and if I can recall, Martin Luther King was on my left. We got up to the school, was named McNeil Elementary School, to pull the tent, and the police shot tear gas on us.
Well, when I marched, we didn't have men flanking us. It was women and children. I never saw Martin Luther King. I never marched with Martin Luther King. I never marched with any of those famous men. I marched with Fannie Lou Hamer. That's who we marched with, and it was women and children. I've been shot at. My car's been shot up. I've been almost ran over. I've been jailed. I told my kids I was on vacation. I've been water hosed, but I'm thankful I have never been bit by dogs.
Growing up, I used to see several things about how they
used to spray the water hoses and sick the German shepherds and on a lot of old, and then I can understand kind of like some of these are old black people out here, and these folks just don't seem to give a damn.
Regardless of opinion, the male leaders had one thing in common. They were murdered for their efforts.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene.
My name is Joanne Johnson. I grew up in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Growing up in the South was really prejudiced. We went to segregated school. Everything was segregated when I was growing up. Going to school, we had to go through 3 white schools in order to get to 1 black school. The white schools had everything. We had very little. Of course, we had no indoor plumbing or indoor water. We had to pump outside or in the play area to drink water from. And we also had the outhouse. No indoor anything. We had to walk nearly 3 miles to get to the road to catch the bus, school bus. And our bus was really packed because there wasn't another bus coming that way, because we had to pick up all the kids going the one way to our poor little black school. All our books was used books from the white school with the pages tore out, graffiti, N-words written all over all the pages. Our poor teachers had to tape our books back up, write in information, and we never had enough books to go around. 4 or 5 people had to share 1 book because the pages was tore out, and we had to get together and see what pages was missing with someone else who had the book with the correct information on it. And we had to pay for these tore up books.
President John F. Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. It is considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. It survived strong opposition from the Southern members of Congress, and after JFK's assassination, was signed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson. However, strong supporters of segregation resisted the change.
Many black people were just, in our area, we were truly segregated. Definitely segregated. So black people were black people, white people were white people. I think one big thing that I noticed down there, which while it was happening, I don't think I actually thought about it. I kind of thought, I was a kid then. I was in 2nd grade, so it was great for me. We were out of school for a whole year. Out of school. So I'm in 2nd grade, out of school for a whole year, and there's no virtual learning or anything like that, like today. So we were just out, and our mom, taught us stuff, which was great. But the reason we were out, which hit me later, was because it was a boycott on the school.
School system was bad. It was a separate but not equal. I guess Lee County was not integrated, so the people of that county boycotted for 1 year, so I missed 1 year of schooling.
I got ready to go to high school and to integrate, and in order they closed the school to keep us from attending the school. They closed the school and turned everything into private. So that's kept us from attending, because I was one of the enrollees that was going to go to the high school, and they closed the school to keep us from going, keep the blacks from going to school there in Canton. So they formed a private school at that time, Canton Academy.
Although the Civil Rights Act passed, there was still a long way to go with equality for Black Americans. March 7th, 1965 became known as Bloody Sunday. Around 600 civil rights activists, to include John Lewis and Hosea Williams, marched from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery in protest of voter suppression. The local police, with the sanctioning of the Alabama governor George Wallace, didn't allow the marchers to get far. The protesters were met with whips, nightsticks, and tear gas as they were beat off of the bridge. The brutal attack was captured on television and sparked an outrage.
I became an attorney and an activist because being from Atlanta, I grew up in the shadow of the civil rights movement, grew up hearing about legends like Dr. King, Representative Lewis, Reverend C.T. Vivian, Reverend Lowry. But I want people to understand the civil rights movement is not that long ago. I mean, Ruby Bridges is about 57, 58 years old, maybe a little bit older than that, maybe 60. So it's barely one generation away from the civil rights movement. So when people say it's such a long time ago, I mean, 1964 is only, 60 years ago, if that. And there are individuals still alive that were foot soldiers in the movement and that were leaders in the movement. So it wasn't that long ago.
Along with the civil rights movement, Black Americans faced another war, Vietnam. At the time of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, the ratio of Black combat troops to white were double that for the U.S. population as a whole.
There was more blacks in Vietnam than white. Most of them, more blacks got drafted than whites during Vietnam because they didn't have this outlet where you could get some kind of deferment. A lot of, as long as you was in college, they didn't bother you. If you didn't go to college, they'd get you. And if you have to drop out, like I did, they grab you, like quick. So you didn't have no choice. So you couldn't get a deferment, so most of the blacks went.
The United States of America, land of the free and home of the brave, the land that people from other countries escape to, the place where people can be anything they aspire to be. But something often overlooked is what it took to get here. No, not them. Them, specifically them, the overlooked and underrated, yet always the defining factor in every U.S. documented war. Yet, when shown images of veterans, people of color are often left out.
There's something about unity, being having the brotherhood, ROTC from school. I enjoyed everything about it, so I wanted to see how far I could go with it and, what lies ahead, along with traveling the world. That was intriguing to me.
I joined the Air Force November 6, 1997. I joined because my dad was in the Navy and retired. I had a brother who served, and I even had some uncles who served in the military. One thing that really stood out to me was that when I went to basic training, we had to learn history, right? And one of the craziest things was, out of all the military history that we learned, we didn't speak about not one Black person. And this really bothered me because I grew up knowing that Black people served, since I had people that served in my family all the way back to the Civil War, in fact, that we can trace it. But I also knew about the Revolutionary War with Christopher Addicks and a whole bunch of other people. So it just really bothered me that we had been erased from history.
Yes, we served in this nation in every war, and the war movies do not reflect this, or any other movie. So, or if they are Black faces, they will be easily supplanted by a white face, much like they did in the pre-Motown days, where you had Black superstars, brilliant Black singers, Black talent, but the album cover was a white face. That was common.
50 years after defeating the British at Yorktown, America had already forgotten the crucial role black people played on both sides. By 1783, thousands of black Americans had become involved in the war, and yet, at the 1876 centennial celebration of the Revolution in Philadelphia, not a single speaker acknowledged their contribution in establishing the nation. The most logical reason being slavery. Doing so would give slaves hope. In the 1760s, as colonists began speaking out against the British tyranny, there were those who also pointed out the hypocrisy of advocating for liberty whilst owning slaves.
Not only did they send them, they also sent them in place of like their own sons if they got drafted and things of that nature. We weren't even considered to be fully human, but yet you're fully human in that respect at that time. So you can send somebody to war to take the place of your son that you don't consider to be anything more than property when he's in front of you. But he's a full person in time of war, or because you don't want your son to be in that war. That's crazy.
Without black bodies, the outcome would have no doubt left America under British rule. Still, after the war, blacks had no rights and were all but erased from popular history. I was surprised by it, but I really shouldn't have been, because I've seen it so many times that, I mean, for an example, on Veterans Day, when I go out, you know, even if I'm with some of my other vets and they're not black, I will get overlooked and they'll immediately serve my white counterparts, which is just insane because I could be the only one there that have actually served my time if I'm just with friends. But if I'm with some military buddies, of course they'll serve them too. But normally I make it a point to actually wear something that either says, you know, Air Force or Army, since I did serve in both. But it just blows my mind that like we're not recognized. And so when you see movies and films and everything that doesn't have anybody that's black, that's why I guess people just assume that we didn't serve, you know, outside of, you know, when it came to the Gulf War or something like that. But even still, it's like you just get people that are shocked when they find out that you're a vet. I mean, it's just the weirdest thing. I don't get it, because black people have always been serving, but like I said, I should not be surprised. The Vietnam War had strong opposition from the black community because of the racism they faced at home. Muhammad Ali took a stance and refused to be drafted.
There are many different roads to get to liberation. Some of us are radical. Some of us are conservative. Many of us are progressive. But don't downplay the radicals or the conservatives, because at some point, if you're not listening to the progressives, you're gonna have to hear from the radicals. You know, it's like with Dr. King. Either you're gonna listen to Dr. King or you're gonna listen to Malcolm X. Which one you wanna listen to? But black people are on a spectrum. Many of them are not as passive as you would like to say Dr. King was, and even Dr. King was radical. So, I mean, you're going to have to listen to one of them. And, I mean, Malcolm X wasn't the most radical. We got Huey and Fred and Asada and so many others. So, at some point, you got to understand that the civil rights movement never ended. And one of the leaders of the civil rights movement told me like this: there's no such thing as a civil rights movement. There's the movement. The movement includes the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the Black Panther movement. All those movements came from the same place. It's the Black Liberation Movement, and it never stopped.
The Black Panther Party took up the helm in a fight against police brutality. For one of the first times in the history of the U.S., black Americans were proud to be black and boldly declare it. The Black Panther Party assisted the community with free breakfast programs and health clinics, and the government quickly took notice. They set out to destroy the image of the Black Panthers and the image of black Americans as a whole. In 1969, the FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, labeled the party as an enemy of the United States. The result, Members Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were gunned down as they slept in their apartment in Chicago. Out of an estimated 100 bullets fired, ballistics proved only one came from the Black Panther Party side. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the White House after that determined that they had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. In the FBI document, they are quoted as saying, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did."
The images that we saw, some of them reinforced the America that we lived in. They weren't overt, they weren't in your face. But if you were aware of who you were and the communities that you lived in and the treatment that your family or other families like you received, you saw some of the things that reinforced the second-class citizenship that they tried to put on black people back then.
Well, I always say what you grow up seeing is what you grow up being. And so when you're bombarded with that, and part of my PhD studies in communication, I had to study different traditions in communication, different schools of thought. And one of them is it's called the critical school. And it basically looks at how people with power, how you leverage that power in terms of oppression, in terms of things of that nature. And one name that gets thrown out that I think is just totally disregarded is Karl Marx. Because we hear about Marxism and all the negative things. But from a communication standpoint, one thing he said that I agreed with was whenever you have a society that aims to oppress a certain working group, that oppresses a certain group of people, the key to that oppression is the imagery, the propaganda, the information you put out there.
According to a social science review based on media representations and impact on the lives of black men and boys, there are many forces, material, historical, cultural, and political, that shape and constrict the life chances of black males in the United States. Some of these are long-standing legacies that may take generations to shift, but in other ways, the social, economic, and symbolic place of African American men and boys is recreated and reinforced every day. Among the most important mechanisms for maintaining and changing these perceptions are the mass media, with their significant power to shape popular ideas and attitudes. However, black women aren't exempt.
They never sensationalize or broadcast white-on-white crime. It's always on the 6, 11, or 6, 12, and 11 o'clock news. It's always us, right? So a lot of times it's often African Americans on the news. So the pictures and images that are depicted are always negative of us. And then they tend to find someone in the crowd who struggles to articulate, might even be missing a tooth or 3 in the front, with a do-rag on, and they're gonna give them the most camera time, and they're gonna probably try to capture the most idiotic comments that are made by that individual to now cast the dispersions, as well as that this is the true imagery of every African American being sold through this one person, and that's not true.
It has a deleterious and devastating effect on the black community, on the black psyche. And since we're the most ostracized and disregarded and misused and abused demographic in America, there are some who actively seek to basically misidentify themselves and separate themselves from us at all possible turns.
When I was about, 11 or 12,
I didn't even know it was racist. It was just accepted. Accepting is only later on in life I knew it was underlying racism. I was at the doctor's office, and I was going in for a surgery. When I came out of surgery and stuff, I felt so good because this doctor had done so much for me. Took away the pain, took away all the pretty much gave me a new outlet on life. Because I had a lot of pressure in my head, my eyes, in and out of surgeries and stuff. Nobody knew what was going on. This guy had given me so much, but also took away a lot of hope, and just one swipe. I mean, just one little phrase, sentence that he said. I had asked him. Well, I made a statement to him. I said, you know, you were so good. You was so good at your job and stuff, and I really want to be like you. And I really did. I wanted to be a doctor. And he said, hold out your hands. And I held out my hands like this. And he said, you don't have the hands for it. And that was just an easy letdown, but he was basically saying, no, you're not gifted, you're not smart enough, and you don't have the stride, or you're black and you would always be beneath everyone else. And that right there stayed with me for pretty much even to the day. I look back on that, and I don't think I really rose up out of that until later on in life. That letdown, it was extremely hurtful for me.
I feel like they play a huge part because, I mean, our kids are fed this, and not even just kids, even as an adult, you know, you can be fed something over and over so much to where your mind automatically starts to adapt those types of thought processes. And, you know, you start to wonder, well, like, is it like that? Or are they really like that? Or, you know, you just start to question a lot of things without even having a true foundation or answers.
It would be very easy for me if I was a white woman to view all black women or all black men as, you know, baby mamas and baby daddies that are on welfare, relying on the government. That would be a safe thing for me to assume because it doesn't require any growth on my part. Doesn't require any education, doesn't require you to think any deeper than what you've been fed by the media, you've been fed, you know, perpetuated through generations or whatever.
One of America's greatest pastimes, watching television and being entertained. Also, the best way to send messages and change viewpoints. But what if those images were always negative or non-existent? How do they make those watching feel about themselves and others?
It ain't fitting, it just ain't fitting. Ain't fitting.
David Warwick Griffith, son of an ex-Confederate soldier and known as the father of cinema for his popularized techniques still used today. In 1915, he changed the landscape of filming with his cinematic masterpiece of The Klansman, later known as The Birth of a Nation. The 3-hour masterpiece showed Black Americans as brutish, lazy, morally degenerate, and dangerous, along with the subjective history of the Civil War, Reconstruction, and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Prior to this, films were short and non-inspiring. D.W. Griffith went on to co-found United Artists along with a few of his other friends. They are responsible for such films as The Gold Rush in 1925, starring co-founder Charlie Chaplin, The African Queen in 1951, High Noon in 1952, Some Like It Hot in 1959, The Magnificent Seven in 1960, They flourished in the 70s with Rocky and Annie and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In 1981, they were bought by MGM and released Rain Man. In 1992, they revived the Bond films and later went on to film Hotel Rwanda. Although we may enjoy the films, the underbelly of United Artists' beginning languished in white supremacy. Walt Disney was a producing partner at United Artists before moving on. Disney now provides a disclaimer on Disney Plus for their films such as Peter Pan, Dumbo, and The Jungle Book. Warner Brothers is not exempt from their racist past and admit that Tom and Jerry's depiction were commonplace in American society and were wrong then and are wrong today.
Ain't no cat around here. There ain't no cat, no place, no house, no ma'am.
Not even children's cartoons were free from the racial undertones of the United States. The 1880s ushered in new industries, soap, canned food, and even cigarettes. The newcomers fought hard to persuade buyers. For soap, what could be more appealing than changing black skin to white? If soap could do this, then surely it could clean anything. Along with the new industries, branding emerged. Manufacturers and other businesses turned to advertising. Large department stores, Wanamaker's, Macy's, Marshall Field's, Sears Roebuck, and Montgomery Ward all needed a way to reach their markets. Once slavery ended, the rebranding of Black Americans depicted as being lazy, dim-witted, and immoral began. By the 1920s, motion pictures arrived and sold it a new way to advertise. America was bombarded with racist images in film and the ads they showed. Hundreds of movies were made each year. Hollywood became the birthplace of movie studios with white men in control of the imagery of black people.
Amos and Annie was like a joke. Black people don't act like that. Really don't act like that. Why did they put black people on TV like that? I always wanted to know, and there was no answer. There really wasn't. But I just wanted to know, why did they put black people on TV to act like that? So crazy. It was just so crazy. And that to this day, I never liked Amos and Andy. I know people needed a job, and this was a job to show the first black people on TV, but they made them act really crazy.
They wanted you to think that's the way we all look, and that's the way we all act. But we don't all look like them. We don't all act like that. You know, and just to define us, and that's what it's been known to do. History been known to do that.
30s and 40s ushered in the age of the Negro servant. Gone with the Wind became a popular film, garnering Hattie McDaniel an Academy Award. However, due to Jim Crow laws, she was not allowed to sit in the audience. After World War II, black filmmakers began to have a strong voice and movies began addressing racial tensions. By the 1950s, it was estimated that 10 million homes owned a television set. Black actors came into the forefront. Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte became household names. But for every one black person on film in a positive light, there were hundreds of white films to counter the images.
TV show, basically, if you're talking about black TV shows, it was Amos and Andy, you know, and like you watching them play Shirley Temple with somebody out there dancing and smiling all the time, you know, and for us cartoons, if you watching something like Bugs Bunny or something, there's a little black thing on there and they hitting it all the time or something like that, you know, they basically stuff I watched growing up.
And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and he has two eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me?
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one.
Originally completed in the 1940s, the doll study helped win Brown versus the Board of Education. The results showed the devastating effect of life in a society that was intolerant to Black Americans. During the study, the Clarks had to paint a white doll brown since Black dolls were not yet manufactured. According to Kenneth Clark, these children saw themselves as inferior, and they accepted the inferiority as part of reality. And in 2020, it's still an issue.
And so because of that, like you had things like the Keys codes, the Maze codes, and film and television that eliminated or made it almost impossible for us to actually be on TV.
Maids, butlers, brutes, and mulattoes were the norm for Blacks in film.
Art matters. Art impacts how we see ourselves because humans lack the ability to perceive something they don't have a reference for. Our brain doesn't work that way. If we can't see it, it doesn't exist. So we're not represented on TV with our films with any basic human representation.
The 1950s ushered in the serious Black actor with Porgy and Bess, Raisin in the Sun, and To Kill a Mockingbird. But the promise was greater than reality. Segregation still existed. With the rise of blaxploitation films in the late 60s and 70s offering flashy lead roles that overshadowed character development, serious roles were overshadowed by Superfly, Blackula, Shaft, and films like Cleopatra Jones. What Black viewers took as comedy, white viewers mistook as a reality of Black life. A research paper titled Living with Western Television in 1976 coined the term. Representation in the fictional world signifies social existence. Absence means symbolic annihilation, which is why white people freak out when they don't see themselves as a lead on every show, which is why they don't realize that Black people can, in fact, be Danish.
It speaks to value. How are you valued? And some people just see individuals more valuable as labor, as the workforce, as the grunts, whatever it may be, but not necessarily valued in terms of branding.
From the beginning, television, the image meal for mainstream, has not known quite what to do with Black characters. It has struggled, as has the country, to find a place for them that white Americans could find comforting and digestible from the safe distance of their living rooms. Reality had nothing to do with it.
Well, why don't you get a job and go to work? You almost had me a job this morning.
Black actors in 1970 transitioned in blaxploitation films, also known as race films, but Hollywood still pushed the domesticated roles before embracing the thug.
I'm always wary of things that have mass appeal, especially in today's Black television. If it normally has mass appeal, you gotta question why did someone up top allow this to go through and blow up? And it's normally because the narrative that it pushes is detrimental to Black progress in a lot of ways. And so there's a fine line. How do you support, and you want to be able to support Black actors, Black producers, Black writers, but you also want to make sure that the content, what they're putting out, is going to uplift, is going to strengthen, it's not going to perpetuate those stereotypes. And so there's this balance, because I watch Good Times, I watch other shows like that because you want to support, and they were the only Blacks you saw on television.
I definitely didn't see myself on Good Times, Good Times based on a family living in the projects in Chicago.
Now, as you got older and you can become more selective, then maybe you can go back and look and say, okay, I see how that was problematic. Even if it was based on a certain level of reality. That wasn't the only Black experience. in America. So why that show? Why that particular black experience? And then some of the over-the-top characters. You know, JJ, you loved JJ growing up. After a while, you're like, come on, JJ, you got to tone it down a little. And, you know, and yeah, so that's all a part of it. And so hopefully we have enough intellect to be critical consumers.
I mean, I do remember, you know, spending the summers watching MTV, but not watching for very long because the videos were not interesting and there was nobody that was reflective of me on MTV. It was a conspicuous absence of black people on MTV.
At the time, the president of CBS Records Group reportedly had to threaten to remove all other CBS videos from MTV before the network agreed to play Billie Jean.
Michael Jackson exploded. And then they were forced to play black people because they were the most requested.
April 15, 1993, a New York Times article on television titled Black Life on TV, Realism or Stereotypes stated, violence and pathology are inherent in being black, and crack is a required character. What you see often becomes a part of your memory and thus a part of your life experience. For Black Americans, this experience has been bleak.
Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll?
I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon that was going on because there was in the 70s, late 70s, there was a lot of black people because it was going through that black exploitation era. So it goes like in cycles. So in the 70s, there was a lot of black people on film because the industry, matter of fact, black movies helped to save many of the major studios. In the 80s, it started to disappear, and then they came back in like the mid-90s, and then they disappeared again at the top of the century. And then they reemerged again.
In 2019, black directors who had films in the 90s spoke up. For a brief moment, almost every studio had a project in development with a black director or wanted to. Movies like Do the Right Thing, Boys in the Hood, Love Jones, Best Man, New Jack City, and Brown Sugar flourished on the big screen. While Living Single, The Cosby Show, A Different World, Martin, Sister Sister, Moesha, and Family Matters dominated the weekly viewing ratings. It had appeared that Hollywood had finally woken up to appreciating the black dollar.
Trust me, it was a huge deal for us. You know, you talk about how people gather around the TV now for some of the popular shows. That was the only TV in our house. And everybody, you know, where you couldn't agree on, somebody wanted to see a cowboy show, which was my dad, or somebody wanted to see a cop show or a comedy series. But when it came to that, as a black family, we all were in agreement. Let's watch this, because this is amazing. This is representing us.
You know what show actually made me decide to even remotely think about college? A Different World. The show A Different World, honestly, that was my first time even learning about the black experience in college. A Different World was what did that for me. And it made college seem very cool.
However, the article was not titled, "They Set Us Up to Fail" without reason. The optimism was short-lived. As the new millennium approached, director Charles Lane stated, all Hollywood did was enough to give themselves a pat on the back. Black directors were told they were in director jail, that they were limiting themselves with black projects, or they had enough black filmmakers. Black films became whitewashed and then banned for their failures at the box office, or the ideas were outright stolen while expected to outperform the white projects. Why is this so important? Movies and television have been the gathering place for families. Images matter. Images of the civil rights on the news helped to turn the tide.
Basically, when they had all the riots when Martin Luther King got killed, like that, so that's when you first saw the first black TV anchor, you know, then, because they brought him on there to get, you know, into the black area for the crowd. And that's basically my first saw a black TV anchor. It was always Walter Cronkite or somebody like that.
the same outlet started using negative images of Black Americans on the news night after night. Robert Townsend, best known for the 5 Heartbeats and the Hollywood Shuffle, held nothing back when speaking out on Black films. He said, "People calling the shots are white executives. As long as it is ghetto and people are carrying guns, they'll give it 4 thumbs up and 9 stars." He continued by saying, "We see Black lower class, but not the Black working people. Most Black people are trying to keep their family together. If shown, it is plot driven by drugs and shady dealings."
So it's like America has this love-hate relationship with how they can use Black fare to make profit. And once that model is put out, just like in the Black exploitation era, just like in the 90s, they're cast aside for the white people. And so living single became the model by which Friends, because they were on the same network, same studio, same studio, and then the people of Friends had the audacity, or one of the ignorant people on there said that we should have a Black version of Friends. And he had to be reminded that living single was the model by which Friends was.
To openly be prejudiced and put these things out there. And that's kind of when it started that like every Black person was a criminal. If you go watch Chips or any of those old shows, every criminal, and they didn't know any other way. They're like, well, we're trying to be honest. And it's like, well, yeah, but you could try to paint a better picture if you wanted to.
30 million Blacks, less than a half male, a fraction teens, and only a quarter with criminal records? Yet, the subject matter leads the shows and movies. Tim Reed said, "What you have is a few million people driving an entire media image of Black America. It's wrong, and we know it's wrong." This barrage of negative imagery played right into the hands of the War on Drugs campaign.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the President has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
The Cosby Show was a saving grace, and then the backlash came and the stereotypical roles flourished once again. A massacre of Black imagery began.
This is another reason why I always said, like, I love shows like Martin. I love shows like the Jamie Foxx show. I love watching a lot of those things that we found that was comedic at the time. But at the same time, I truly and honestly believe that those shows should have stayed either off the air or strictly for us, whether it was on BET or whatever the case may be, for the reason that a lot of the white people should not have been allowed to absorb a lot of that because they think that that's how we are.
Kevin Hooks, who directed Passenger 57 with lead actor Wesley Snipes, filmed a movie in Harlem and was asked to litter the streets to make it look more like the images of Harlem. Hooks deflected with, "Whose reality are we talking about? It's not like we're making something else out to be Harlem." But the concern was that white America would be confused by the cleaner image. In the early 2000s, UPN thrived off of Black shows before becoming the CW network. Without warning, popular shows featuring Black friends and families were pulled off the air and replaced by all-white teen shows. Black Americans are the canvas for all of society's ills to be projected on.
What really sparked the civil rights movement, especially what happened at the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis, they knew, John Lewis and everybody, they knew that there would be cameras. And they actually knew that they would be physically attacked. And they knew that, okay, if we are physically attacked and it's caught on camera, the entire nation will see the injustice of Black people in America. And it was those images, that seeing 60-year-old Black women being bit by dogs just for walking down the street. It was those images of seeing a 9-year-old girl being sprayed by a water hose A 40-year-old firefighter spraying a high-powered water hose onto a 9-year-old black girl. It was those images that helped spark the moral conscience of this nation.
A report from the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorder reviewed the coverage of 1967 riots and concluded many papers and media failed by exaggeration of both mood and event. They failed to report adequately on the causes and consequences of civil disorder and on the underlying problems of race relations. They have not communicated to the majority of the audience, which is white, a sense of degradation, misery, and hopelessness of the life in the ghetto. They went on to say, media distortions are multifaceted, especially relative to real-world facts. The idle black man on the street corner is not the true face of poverty in America, but it is the dominant one in the world as depicted by the media.
And that's one of my earliest recollections of institutional racism, because a black face put on crack is an institutional thing because we don't control the media. They control the media, and the media is an institution. So I've seen firsthand that the majority of the crack users that will come through my neighborhood were white. And that includes celebrities. I remember wrestlers used to come through. Myrtle Beach is a very high tourist area. So anytime the celebrities would come through and get their drugs, they would come through Atlantic Beach. White celebrities at that. So we saw a different world than what the media painted. We know that the majority of the users were white.
It's creating a level of false perception of who black people are. You know, we asked that question earlier about the officer who came to the car, and why was he nervous? Why was he maybe fearful of his life? Maybe because he probably watched too many 1990 movies about drugs and violence, or the depictions that he sees on the TV about young black men as super predators, or whatever the lingo that's being thrown around. Maybe he has that etched in his mind. And so, you know, I think that affects not only white people and how they perceive black bodies and black people, but even black people and how we perceive ourselves.
The perception from the ads, media, and TV have played into negative public reality. Black people have been denied jobs, housing, and their lives put at risk.
Truth of the matter is, a lot of white people, particularly the ones that would become your judges, the majority of them were not interacting inside of black neighborhoods growing up. So their only indoctrination of the black experience is what they see on television, whether it be through the news, whether it be through media, through movies, television shows, whatever. That's their indoctrination into the media. Into the black experience. They're not living it, so they don't know. Therefore, they're like the empathy for that. Whereas Lil Johnny, they can see empathy for Lil Johnny because they see them in Lil Johnny, but not in Tyrone.
The results have been devastating and proven over and over again when it comes to sentencing, whereas Brock Turner received 6 months for rape and told there is no need to ruin his life, while Khalif Browder spent 3 years in Rikers without a trial for allegedly stealing a backpack. A study on media representation and the impact on the lives of black men and boys proved that negative mass media portrayals were strongly linked with lower life expectations among black men. Print media, television, the internet, advertising, and even video games shape the public views and attitude toward men of color. The representations create problematic attitudes in audiences. A black child is also harmed. The negative images push the promotion of helplessness, and anything outside of the stereotyping seems unreal or unobtainable.
I don't know if it's the media that does it or what, but that's the way people think, that the black folks is all they want. They're lazy and don't want to work and all that, because they keep putting that on TV that they're on food stamps, and it's not true. But it's hard to get that across.
In 2004, the first black reality show aired on BET, College Hill. Although it had its issues, like A Different World, it gave another generation hope. Quickly, television heads saw the need for more black reality shows to counter the positive images of black reality.
I think that in You know, as black women and men in film and media, we don't do an amazing job at getting the correct stereotype, the correct perception across. For example, I remember growing up and seeing like Real Housewives of fill in the blank. For me, it was Atlanta, but I've seen a lot of other shows and thinking like, wow, like if I was a white person that have never had an experience or never had a positive experience with a black person, and then watching this, angry and throwing things and drama filled and all that, I'm like, this would be a terrible depiction because one, we're not like that. Two, they're probably not even like that in real life. This is just TV. They get paid to do this.
Flavor of Love, I Love New York, Basketball Wives, Love and Hip Hop, R&B Divas, and The Real Housewives of Atlanta quickly replaced the college theme with the stereotypical black woman. Weekly, the shows centered on being loud, materialism, and fights, and the negative portrayal of black women continued. Casts that didn't have the negative storylines were quickly removed. Boycotts by black audiences fell on deaf ears because they weren't the only viewer of the shows nor the target audience.
And I think this is what we should all focus on, including some of the black-owned media today. I mean, we see the reality TV shows. How many of those black TV shows that are so inspirational? You know, they show that women are just fighting on TV and cussing and going on. I don't want to see that stuff, man. I want to see the things that really matters most.
What matters most is positive images. From film, TV to media, black Americans are bombarded with negative images of black people and positive images of white people. When many seek help from the negativity, the image they see is also white. Although a touchy subject for many, the depiction of Jesus is off limits. However, the image of Jesus was created to appeal to the masses.
Again, white supremacy, again, not white people, but white supremacy as an ideology, as a mindset, has affected every area of society in America for well over 400 years. And what do I mean when I say that? What does that have to do with the imagery of seeing what I would call Nordic Jesus? You know, this lily white Jesus with green or blue eyes and blonde hair, you know, with rosy cheeks. Well, that imagery, it stems from white supremacy. We know, just reading the Bible, anybody with a brain can read the Bible and see the scripture describes Jesus as a Jewish man who lived about 2,000 years ago, historically, in the Mediterranean area. That means that Jesus was not European, okay? And he wasn't lily white. He had some kind of experience with the sun, okay? And we also know that the Jewish people came from the Hebrews. Well, the Hebrews lived in Egypt for over 400 years as slaves. And the Bible even describes them as being hard to differentiate between the Egyptians and the Jewish people. So that lets you know that these people were darker skinned people. But history can be revised when you have a supremacist mindset and you want to imagine God in your likeness and in your image. And God is like, no, I don't succumb to your image and your likeness. I am who I am. I'm the Omega and I'm the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. And so what we see when we see those images of white Jesus, that is a white supremacist view of who God is. And we need to reject that because that's not who God is.
Imagine a world in which you never saw someone who looked like you on television, or if you did, they were always in a negative role. For Black Americans, this has always been the reality. History starts in front of the camera. Unfortunately, until recently, most Black films were written and produced by white men. As with mainstream films, the roles focused on domestic servants, brutes, drug dealers, pimps, welfare queens, and killers. Hollywood created stereotypes of Black people that anyone could take as fact if they didn't attempt to seek the truth. Studios and networks continue to perpetuate the image to this day.
Birth of a Nation was the greatest propaganda movement of this
the past century. And so now we're having to rewrite it. We're taking apart the lost cause imagery, and we're putting the real emphasis on the real individuals who are responsible for the theft, murder, rape, and pillage of an entire people, and then trying to blame those people.
But you have to start thinking about our perception. So I think it becomes important to control the narrative. And the way that we control the narrative is, one, we need more Black women, men, kids, creatives in the film industry, period. Whether that's TV, music, movies, we need you, because the only way we're going to change the narrative is by literally changing the casting, changing the producing, changing the people that are editing, things like that. So that starts with us, but also opportunity.
It's been so much, growing up, I grew up in East Lake Meadows in Atlanta. And it done been so much, we had, it was brutality was very strong back then. And I remember one time, and the police had a warrant for me for theft by taking. I was young, and when I looked out the window, I heard a lot of people, they getting ready to go to school, they was like, I look out on police, it was like about 10 cars. And so my first thought was to jump out the back window, because my mama know how to do it. So I was, Jimmy, come here. And my mother, she's still handicapped now. She barely could walk. And so I went and stood beside, and my sister opened the door, and they said, can we, they said, we got a warrant for Jimmy here. So my mother said, well, can I read the warrant? All white police in there, about 10 of them. So by the time he had my mama the warrant, he took his forearm, and he knew my mama was handicapped. He took his forearm and hit her in the mouth, knocked her down. My mother didn't do nothing but ask to see the warrant. My mother is a Christian lady, and she just wanted to see the warrant. That's all she asked. No nads on that. He just did like, when he handled the warrant, he just came like this, bam, and he knocked her down. And that's when me and my sister just went crazy. And they locked all of us up. They put my mama in a car, and her leg was, she couldn't move because she's handicapped now. Remember, she done been shot in the head and paralyzed her whole right side down. And my sister, they took her to jail. And when it was so funny, because, I mean, not funny in that manner, but when we got in the paddy wagon, and I looked and see who the driver was, that he was a Black man. And I said, man, all these white police done came in and they left the Black man in the paddy wagon. And it really, it bothered me, and I started paying more and more attention, because racism was going on in our neighborhood, but police brutality, but we didn't look at it like that. We just looked at it like, bam, man, just another thing, another day, bam.
The war on drugs, also known as the war on blacks, started under Nixon and continued through Reagan, Bush, and Clinton.
If we have more police interacting with people, having them on the streets, we can prevent crimes. We can prevent petty crimes from turning into something worse.
Growing up in Atlanta Beach for the first part of my life was somewhat like a paradise, because it was a black city, historically Black town in the South. We are a Black mayor, Black police chief. My grandmother owned businesses, my aunt owned businesses. Everything was great when I was growing up, but towards the late 80s, early 90s, things changed when, like the rest of America, crack and drugs just invaded my neighborhood as well, and it changed the landscape of it.
The Ku Klux Klan is part of the police. They just, you gotta look at that angle, like, why are they getting away with it? It's just like they got the authority now just to go kill a Black person. If a person did something wrong, a traffic violation, the police make you get on the ground, or it automatically think you got drugs in your car.
First of all, a lot of people that I knew in my projects, I witnessed them indulging in the crack. I witnessed some of the other people selling the crack. I witnessed the police coming through rounding up, and when you think about it, it was all a setup. Back in the 80s, it was all a setup to round up a bunch of Black guys and lock them up, and literally try to lock them up and throw away the key. And I can put that together with the story that happened to me since I've been in Georgia. I was in a bar, another business of mine that I had two partners. One was an older white guy, and his wife was a Black girl, a younger black lady. And we were in a bar in Powder Springs, Georgia. I was sitting at the bar, and there was an empty chair next to me, and then a guy sitting in the chair right next to the empty chair, and then my group was on the other side of me, and we were talking, whatever. But he had been sitting there all night. We got up, myself and my friend. We got up. We sung karaoke. We came back. We sat there for a while, and just before he got up to leave, he kind of leaned down into my ear. And he said, "Slavery isn't over." And yeah, that's the look, my face just like, and he proceeded to walk out the door. So the guy that was with me, the older white guy, he saw the look on my face and he said, "What did he say to you?" And I said, "I don't even want to repeat it because I got to make sure I heard him right. Like, I have to think about this again and make sure, I got to run it back in my head to make sure I heard him right." And he said, "Slavery isn't over." So I turned around and there was this a white lady behind me, and she said, "Yeah, you heard him right, because before he came to you, he came to me. And I don't play those games because I have multiracial kids. I have biracial kids." And I told him he need to get out of here with that. So he did say that to me. So, which puts me back into when I think about when I was in high school, when they came through my projects hurting with these big vans, throwing the guys in the vans, 10, 20 of them at a time, however many they could fit at a time. To me, that was slavery isn't over.
I think that there was a concerted effort to destroy the nuclear family of African Americans. I think after the unity we had in the 60s and the early 70s, we were seen as a supreme threat. And so elements outside of our community pumped dangerous drugs and guns into our community to destroy it. I think that people have now acknowledged that through the war on drugs and the war on crime, which is war on black folks, and that we are now educated enough to look for the breadcrumbs that connect it back. So I think, again, whether it was Nixon's policies coupled with Reagan's policies, coupled with Bush's policies, and then escalated by Bill Clinton's policies, you've seen the destruction of the African American community. But the good thing about our people is we are a resilient people. And the more you try to destroy us, you realize that we're seeds. So when you tried to bury us, we grew into powerful oaks. And so I'm hurt by what happened to our community, but I'm also encouraged by this new generation and their energy and their education about learning about what happened in the 70s and the 80s.
In the late 80s and the early 90s, a rap group by the name of NWA made the plight of Black America mainstream with a strong message to the police. But black entertainers had long used music as their way of telling the struggle, from Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five's The Message. March 3rd, 1991, all of America received a first-hand account of police brutality caught on video. The songs of black plight became reality to those who denied its existence.
He sustains more than 50 baton blows and shocks by a taser gun. Little does he know, his arrest and brutal beating are captured on video by George Holliday, who lived in the apartments across the street.
Oh, it was, man, like, this police, hey, it was bad for Rodney King, and I was very upset, and it's racist full extent.
Nobody had ever seen anybody get beat down like that on camera anyway. So to me, it didn't matter what he did or any of that. All I saw was the injustice, like everybody else did.
We have this on video, something that has been happening for so long.
They're about to kill this dude. What could they possibly, all six of them, hitting this dude with a stick, like what could they possibly be trying to gain from this when they could have just arrested him? Like,
we have things still occurring. We have Rodney King being just plummeted, beat on TV. We can see it. We see this video. And I was like, yes, yes, there has to be some type of justice. Now, I wasn't too happy about how they handled it, because it was like an up and down roller coaster through the whole thing. Are the cops going to be penalized? Are they going to be penalized? Is there going to be any justice for it? You know, it was a long case.
In an effort to deflect from the beating, Rodney King's record went on public trial instead of the conduct of the LAPD, and has become the standard for each case after, whether it was Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, George Floyd, and even Breonna Taylor.
And this happens on a regular, just like these young folks getting killed by the police every other day that they show on TV. All of this stuff just continues to happen, and they continue to cover it up and make excuses for it.
If you are sworn in, you decided that this is what you want to do with your life. You're a police officer, a firefighter, like these are things you do. Like, your job is to serve and protect, not to kill us. Like, that is not what you're designed to do. And if your view of a villain is a black man 90% of the time, we are always at a disadvantage.
Rodney King made the world see, but white America made it an isolated event.
Was Jimmy Lee Jackson a one-off? Was Emmett Till a one-off? We just happened to see this one live on video recording. And if it was a one-off, then why do we have to have Tamir Rice? Why do we have to have Mike Brown Jr.? Why do we have to have Jimmy Atchison? Why do we have to have so many others? Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, if it was a one-off. You just got to see what African Americans have been experiencing since they were brought over here in 1619.
In 2008, the U.S. and the world saw change and hope renewed.
Yes, we can to opportunity and prosperity.
I was really so happy that President Obama was running. I did everything in my power to get people to vote for him, to make sure that people voted for him. I authorized and everything. The night he was elected, I shouted. I cried all night. I was so happy that we finally got a black president in.
When Obama was president, they felt the need to express their disgust. And by they, I mean the racist people. They felt the need to express their disgust in a black man holding the highest office, not only in our land, but the most powerful position in the world. That was never supposed to be given, in their mind, to a black man. That's why the venom just came out. You know, they attacked him. They attacked his family.
It is a miracle. It's a miracle that a black man is the president of the United States.
One of my jobs was to inspect the unit for EO. And I inspect every unit in the state of Indiana with the National Guard unit. And when I seen the picture of Bush, I took it down. The commander said, "What are you doing?" I said, "He's not a commander no more. So let's take it down." "And who are you?" I say, "I'm the state EO." So, and I had about 20 pictures of Obama, commander-in-chief, and places of that in each unit who didn't have it. And they say, "Well, who do you think you're supposed to be?" I say, "Well, who do you think you're supposed to be?" The commander-in-chief is not Bush no more. It's Obama. You live with it.
Only white people are supposed to occupy the White House. And when Barack Obama did, during the greatest recession since the Great Depression, they wanted black people, a black man, to come save them from this, as they do often with the establishment of new television shows, as they've done with blaxploitation. They wanted somebody to come in and save them. They had never been through this before, so they elected someone that they've never elected before to come help save them from themselves. And then once they got that problem in line, they didn't want Barack Obama in there anymore, or anyone that reflected Barack Obama, and therefore they got a game show host.
Just like black victims, the American president was attacked and his credibility challenged. Nothing was off limits, not even his tan business suit. And after 8 years, America heard an old calling.
We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again.
When was America great?
Making America great again. How do we make America great again when black people are part of the American society? Black people are part of the American culture. Yet, we see the inequality continue day after day, primarily against black people. Isn't that part of America?
You know, I just think that the Make America Great Again thing was a rebuttal. And Donald Trump is showing his true colors. So it doesn't surprise me that that was his original slogan. And he never really answered what he meant by that. He'll say jobs, he'll allude to education, but for who? Make America great for who? For you and your constituents, or for everybody else that America's never been great for? So I feel like everybody else, that's a stupid comment. Stupid hat.
I could not believe someone would elect this man, but they did. It just broke my heart that he got in the night that he was elected, was president. I could not believe it. It was just heartbreaking.
One, we have to use the power of the vote. Two, we have to hold our elected officials accountable when they're in office, which means that they push forward policies that protect and advance their voters. One thing I give Mr. Trump credit for, he makes sure he takes care of his base. So for Democrats and progressives, we have to make sure they take care of theirs. We need to make sure we close these wealth disparities. We need to deal with the issues of voter suppression. We need to deal with the issues of mass incarceration. And we don't need platitudes. We need actual policy and legislative change.
In 2020, the current administration denies systematic racism exists, while Black America continuously suffers from it.
Real racism would be my case and what I experienced.
On February 16, 2014, Jesse Murray was brutally attacked by 5 men, one of them an ex-police officer.
And so one had me in the headlock. I was in a headlock. One was to the left of me, one was to the right of me, one was in front of me, and they were beating me. I was being beat, like, being beat. I went to reach for my gun, and the white guy, the ex-police officer, he grabbed my hand, just like that. Like, he grabbed my hand, I remember, he grabbed my hand, and it was a struggle. You know, it was a struggle with my firearm, and I pulled, he pulled, and that's you know, so yeah.
There is a healthy fear that even if you're doing what you're supposed to do, even if you're just living the life that you're supposed to live and abiding by your laws, you could still die and then not be off of your own merit. We have to be safe first, because if we're not safe first, what's gonna stop me from being the next hashtag?
If all the things we've been dealing with and all the things we've gone through as a country, to have any group, whether it be black, pink, white, doesn't matter, enslaved or for over 450 years, are going through all these challenges for so long. Today, to have the behaviors that we're seeing perpetrating in our society, and then speak of the American dream, the question we need to ask, was America ever great? Because if America was ever great, then we ask the follow-up question, who was it great for? And then if you experiment to it, who is it great for, who has it benefit the most?
Well, I felt like, at one point, I felt like we came a long way in America as far as what we read. But when you go visit places like Waycross, Georgia, when you go down the rural South, you'll see that it's not much changed. And I have to remind myself all the time that even though you grew up in New York, this is Georgia.
We live in a society as black people that we, have to try and be a part of. But let's just be real, we're not, this is not our society. Come on, this is not our society. I mean, I don't care how successful you think you are, you try to be or whatever. And even that's used to make whoever is not so successful feel like they can attain. But this is not our society. Like, this is not our culture. Like, our culture, like we like who we are, like as black people, we're humble, strong, powerful.
They have that privilege to where, like, they have that long spoon that we don't get. We have to start from ground zero. Them, they come in like if you playing the game, you can start at the halfway point. Us, you have to go all the way back.
If you ever say MAGA, make America great again, at what point for any black person has America been great? That is always and will remain the question, because for ourselves, we have made America great. For others, we have made America great, and that spans from slavery. We've built this country. Our ancestors built this country. I know without a doubt that my ancestors did, because I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting my great-grandparents who were born at the end of slavery. So they well know what was facing and what was done to their parents growing up. So at what point, the question still is, what point was America great to and for black people, let alone any other minority? But at what point was America great for them? Was it during Jim Crow? Was it during slavery? Of course not. Was it during the Civil Rights era? At what point, because we just walked out of that one. I don't care if it was 40, 50 years ago, we just walked out of that era. So at what point was America great again? And we're revisiting civil rights issues right now in 2020.
In June of 2020, Roger Goodell apologized for not listening to black players sooner in regards to taking a knee in a stance against police brutality.
Don't tell me you sorry. I don't want your sorry. Y'all been saying sorry since the 60s, since the 20s, since the end of slavery. Where's the actual investment into the community? Where is the reparation? Where is the obliteration of this racist prison industrial complex? Where is the reforms of American society? Where is the obliteration of the deplorable redlining in our community? Where are the laws that are unequal and unjust? When are they going to be reformed? I don't want your apologies. They do me no good. They've caused too much death already.
Either you're going to be on the right side of history, or you're going to be in the history books right along with the people that were yelling at Ruby Bridges and the people that rode around putting crosses in people's yards and hanging folks. Which side of history do you want to be on? Black people are loving people. We want America to be what it says on paper. And so let's make America what it says on paper. And then, and only then, will America be great for all Americans.
All we need is love. We can do it. Let's do it together. I just want to breathe. I just want to live in peace. I just want to be all I can be. So let's spread some love. We can all do it together. We are the human race. Sitting at the stand your ground. I just know we got to make it stop when I walk out my persona. They can try, but they can't divide us. We don't care about whipping foreign. Melanin in me, spread love, roll around the block. I just wanna breathe, I just wanna live in peace. Spread love, we gotta stick together, keep the peace. Spread love, we gotta stick together, keep the peace. I just wanna breathe.